Many years ago, a movie came out where the son of a slave falls in love and has a baby with a rich white woman. His father chases him, they cut off his arm, put a hook in it, fill it with honey for the bees to sting him, and finally set him on fire. And from that day on, if you say his name in front of the mirror 5 times, the Candyman appears to kill you. That's why today on the Summarizer, Candyman. The story begins in 1977 in a suburb called Cabrini Green, where a boy named William lives. The problem is that in that neighborhood, the police are looking for a man named Sherman accused of several attempted murders. And one day, while going to the laundry, he sees a hole in the wall, and after dropping off the clothes, he's already leaving when suddenly someone throws him some candy. And there he sees that someone appears with a hook in his hand and is dressed just like the Candyman. At that moment, the police hear a scream, they go to look for him, and for that moment, we don't know what happened. In the same neighborhood, but 42 years later, we meet Troy and his friends, who are going to his sister's house. Her name is Brianna, and she lives with her boyfriend Anthony in their new apartment, because apparently many years ago, they demolished the poor houses in Cabrini Green to build these buildings for rich people. Oh, and another thing that's important to know is that Anthony is a painter. During dinner, they talk about a couple of things that nobody's interested in, until at one point, Troy starts telling a horror urban legend. And there he tells the story of Helen Lyle, a white student who was doing her thesis on the urban legends of Cabrini Green, and to investigate, she went several times to take pictures and talk to people in the neighborhood. But one day after that, she snapped, slit her Rottweiler's throat, and when the police arrived, she was in one of the apartments making snow angels in the pool of blood. He also tells them that there are articles about her, and that she was arrested at the time but escaped almost immediately. Then she rampaged through everything, killing a lot of people, until she kidnapped a woman's baby. And on the night of the annual bonfire, Helen offered the baby as a sacrifice, but people managed to save it, and Helen burned to death right in the middle of Cabrini Green. Pause. This story isn't the real one. Actually, it was always Candyman instead of Helen, but to understand this, you must watch the first movie. But here they show us how urban legends change over time according to the people who tell them. After that, the dinner ends, the other two leave, and at night they start talking about the fact that the next morning, Anthony has to exhibit some new works. But the exhibition is doing not very well, and his boss tells him that he wants to exhibit something new. So Anthony tells him about an idea he has about doing something about housing and how white people create spaces for marginalized black communities. And finally, they agree to make it about Cabrini Green. So he starts doing research about that place, about Helen's bonfire, and goes to see the church. But while taking a picture, he gets stung by a bee, which would be irrelevant if we weren't in a Candyman movie. After that, he goes into an abandoned house, takes pictures of some graffiti, and finally meets this guy named William Burke, who tells him that he's been living there since the towers came down, and he accompanies him to his job at a laundry. There, the guy tells him that Helen Lyle was looking for Candyman, and he thinks he found him. And when the protagonist asks him who Candyman was, William tells him that he was a man named Sherman Fields who had a hook in his hand and went out to give candy when he was a kid. But one day, a razor appeared in a white girl's Halloween candy, and when the police came looking for Sherman, he had disappeared. And one day, when he was a boy, he personally saw him. Sherman offered him candy, but he got scared and started screaming, which caused the police to show up and beat him to death on that spot. And worst of all, a couple of weeks later, more razors appeared and more candy, and that's when they realized that he was not only innocent but also harmless. But that was not the last time they saw him. After that, and knowing the story, Anthony starts painting. Later he shows his new work to his girlfriend, and there he tells her the story of Sherman, who after his unjust death became Candyman. But the most important thing is that the legend says that if you say his name 5 times in front of a mirror, he appears to kill you. And I don't understand why, but he wants to call him
Candyman. Candyman. Candyman.
Stop.
Candyman.
Stop it.
Candyman.
Oh, shit.
Another day, in some art exhibition, Anthony presents his work called Say My Name, where there's a mirror where people have to say 5 times Candyman, and inside there are a lot of ugly paintings. But people aren't that stupid and don't say Candyman 5 times. The only thing that happens is that at one point, a girl takes a picture of it, and a critic tells him that his work is crap. So Anthony ends up getting a bit drunk, he sends everyone to hell, and goes home with his girlfriend. But the worst part is, when the gallery owner is with his girl cleaning everything up, and she has no better idea than to name Candyman 5 times.
Candyman, 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 Candyman.
And now he appears to give us the first kills of the movie.
It's showtime!
Candyman. Hey, Candyman.
All right, everybody!
The The next day, the notice of the 2 deaths is on the news, and everybody's talking about Anthony's work. And even though he should be sad because 2 people died and his whole arm is rotting off, he's super happy because now he's famous. Meanwhile, Brianna arrives at work and finds the 2 dead bodies. And on top of that, she starts having flashbacks of when she was a kid and her dad committed suicide in front of her. And on top of that, she starts having nightmares about that day and Candyman appearing in her room. The next day, Anthony goes to look for information about Helen in a library, and there he starts listening to the recordings until at one point he goes up to an elevator, it stops, and at that moment, candy starts falling from the ceiling. He still gets out of there as if nothing happened, and after that, he continues painting faces of Candyman with his hand all rotten, until at night he goes to talk to the critic of the exhibition. It seems that since he's famous now, she finds his work very interesting, but there, Anthony tells her that to really understand his work, she has to say Candyman's name 5 times in front of a mirror. She's still not that stupid and she doesn't do it, but at one point she goes to the bathroom and Anthony's left alone in the apartment, which unfortunately is full of mirrors. And there, Candyman appears again, but this time it seems to be Anthony himself, and the hand that is rotting is the same one that the other guy is missing. Anyway, nothing happens after that, and Anthony goes back to his house, but in the distance we see that apparently the woman did say Candyman 5 times, and so it becomes the 3rd Candyman kill of the movie. After hearing about the woman's death, Anthony goes to find William, and there he tells him that apparently Candyman is not just one person, but a whole honeycomb, and there are more like him. For example, Samuel Evans was killed in the 50s, William Bell in the 20s, but the first one was in 1890, and this is the story Helen found about Daniel Robitaille, a man who made his living painting portraits for wealthy families, and one day he was asked to paint the daughter of a Chicago factory owner. But they fell in love, he got her pregnant, and when she told all this to her father, he sent a bunch of people to hunt him down. But they not only murdered him, they beat him, they cut off his arm and bore him with a hook, and they covered him with honey and let the bees sting him. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, they finally set him on fire. Meanwhile, Brianna sees all her boyfriend's paintings, but he tells her not to look at them because he made a mistake and made Candyman come back. There she tells him that Candyman doesn't exist, she thinks he's crazy, and he ends up breaking all the mirrors in the room, so she goes to live with her brother. There they start talking about their father's works, and he suggests her to make an exhibition to sell them and make some money, but she doesn't want to sell them because those works made her father kill himself. Anyway, this isn't mentioned again in the whole movie, and if someone understood it, please explain it to me in the comments. And while you're down there, please subscribe and turn on the notifications, okay?
Oh, okay.
Meanwhile, at school, there's this girl who was at the exhibition and took a picture of Anthony's work, and she has the brilliant idea to tell her friends about Candyman, and altogether, they start saying his name.
Candyman. 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 Candyman.
At one point, another girl named Trina enters, but when the rest of them want to leave, the door doesn't open, and on top of that, a bunch of bees start appearing in the mirror. Meanwhile, our protagonist is still in his apartment that is a disaster, painting portraits of Candyman with his hand completely rotten and his fingernails falling off. And on top of that, it seems he's now super famous because when his girlfriend goes to another art exhibition, this woman won't start talking about her boyfriend's work and how much she would like to make a gallery with this artist. Later, Anthony finally goes to the hospital to treat the problem in his arm, and there he sees that in the news they are talking about a connection between the murder of the 4 girls and the piece Say My Name, because this is the phrase that was found written in the blood of the victims on the bathroom wall. And on top of that, everything gets even weirder because when the doctor arrives, she tells him that he was born in that same hospital, although her mother had told him that he was born in Chicago. So later, he goes to his mother's apartment and tells her that he heard about Candyman's story, but she tells him not to name him. There he asks her why she always told him he was born in Chicago, and she tells him that he was actually born in River North Hospital and lived his first 2 years in Cabrini, and she supposedly lied to him to protect him.
From what?
There she tells him that she just wanted him to grow up happy and normal, which at least on the normal part he clearly did not. And there we learn that he was the kidnapped baby from Helen's story, and his mother is none other than Anne Marie McCoy from the first movie. And there she tells him that at first they thought the kidnapper was Helen because they found her in her apartment full of blood and everyone thought she was crazy, but in the end it wasn't her but Candyman. Because in the first movie, Candyman wanted the baby to burn in that bonfire so he could raise the baby he never could, but in the end, Helen Ellen saved him and gave him to his mother. The problem is that from that moment, they swore to never to say his name again, because supposedly fame is what gives power to urban legends. But someone didn't keep their word, and Candyman found Anthony. After hearing that, Anthony leaves and ends up sneaking into one of Cabrini Green's abandoned houses. Meanwhile, Brianna and her brother are looking for him everywhere, but nobody knows where he is. So she goes to look for him at the laundry, but there William shows up and kidnaps her. Somewhere else, a boy is arguing with his sisters because they won't let him play a game, but thank goodness, because the game was to name Candyman 5 times. And on top of that, when he enters, he sees his dead sister and Sherman in the mirror. And inside there were 2 girls, so I guess that's 2 kills. Meanwhile, William took the couple to the abandoned church, and since he thinks the neighborhood is still dirty, he says now they need Candyman. So he cuts off Anthony's arm and puts a hook in it to make him look like Candyman, so people will believe in the legend again, tell his story, and Candyman will live forever. But when he's finishing with his clothes, Brianna manages to escape until she gets inside a house, and when William enters, she kills him. Then Anthony appears, but he faints on his girlfriend, and it seems that he's dying when the police arrives. And even though she raises her hands, they still shoot her boyfriend, and Anthony finally dies. At the end, they take Brianna to jail, and a cop gives her the option to say that her boyfriend attacked the police and they had no choice but to shoot, or else they're going to say she was his accomplice and she's going to jail for the rest of her life. So she tells him that she'll say whatever they want only if he lets her see his face in the mirror. The guy adjusts the mirror, and there she says Candyman 5 times.
Candyman. Candyman. Candyman.
Candyman? I love this song!
And now Brianna finally escapes, but not before seeing the first Candyman killing the last remaining cop. And in a cameo by Tony Todd, Candyman tells Brianna to tell everyone about this. That was Candyman. Don't forget to subscribe and comment which movies or series you'd like me to summarize for this Halloween month. See you later.
Okay, bye.